Welcome, everybody. We will wait a minute or two before we get started, but welcome. Feel free to add your name and affiliation, organization in the chat. We're glad to see you all. Thanks for kicking us off, Denise. Great. Thanks for introducing yourselves, everybody. Got a lot of familiar faces in the room and some new ones. I'm going to get started. I am Talia Concravis. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Director of Homeownership Programs. And I'm joined today by three of my colleagues here at OHCS. I'll actually give them a second to introduce themselves. So we can go Alicia, Heather, and Kevin.
Good morning, Alicia Howell, Program Analyst for the HOPE programs.
Hi, good morning. Heather Richter, Program Analyst.
Hi there, Kevin McKay, Program Analyst.
Great, so this is your amazing homeownership programs team that many of you have experience with contracts and reports and support. So we're all here to support everyone today and talk about down payment assistance. So I'm just going to keep going. So if you just entered, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And I'm going to keep going, and there will be plenty of time to have more interactive discussion today. So the objectives of this meeting today are to clarify the goals of the Culturally Responsive and Rural Organization Down Payment Assistance Program, and we'll from now on refer to it as CRRO DPA, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but still a little faster than saying the whole acronym out aloud. Our other goals are to align program changes, future program changes. We haven't made any program changes yet, but align the future program changes with our program goals and priorities. So we're going to talk a lot about that in the beginning. Many of you know that the legislative session is underway, and we want to be prepared to deploy the CRRO DPA funds swiftly if they are approved by the legislature. And then we also just want to make sure that you, our partners, know what to expect when it comes to this type of down payment assistance. So we'll be coming at you with a lot of ideas, some that you've sent us related to program improvement and ideas that we've generated internally. It might be a lot to process, so we will also have time to talk about how else you can give us feedback after you've had some time to process this information. We'll also have polls and time for discussion during this hour and a half that we have with you. So again, thank you for spending your time with us this morning. And we will also be posting the slides and recording to the OHCS website after this meeting, and we'll put the link up at the end of this meeting. So if you don't catch everything that we're saying, it will be there for you to refer back to. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about our current program. I know we have some partners actively using the program. We have some new partners that haven't been awarded DPA through OHCS before. So we're just going to review a little bit about that current program. We're going to talk a little bit about what other states do when it comes to DPA. We're going to have a conversation about prioritizing DPA goals. We are going to discuss some of the feedback you gave us and proposed changes. We'll have discussion and talk about next steps. So packed agenda. We're hoping to have time to get through everything. And so I'll just start with the review of our current down payment assistance program. So just in the past biennium, we released a request for applications, an RFA, in December 2022, and that contained nearly 30 million in down payment assistance funds. This was a combined multiple sources of funds. It was HOPE funds, which is funded by the document recording fee, HOPE Veteran Funds, which is similarly funded. Just 25% of our HOPE funds go to specifically for veterans. We use construction excise taxes that are specific to the counties for down payment assistance. So not every county has this type of funding. And then in the biennium before, we received general funds to offer a culturally responsive organization down payment assistance program. And that was the first time we'd received general funds for down payment assistance to really augment and expand our DPA program, specifically to better reach communities of color throughout Oregon and work towards ending the racial homeownership gap. And so before we got that RFA out, and sorry, I'll go back to, we awarded 21 organizations with about 2-year contracts. We'll talk about when those contracts end in a second. And 15 of those received down payment assistance CRO funds. So many of the organizations received multiple types of DPA funding, and 15 of them specifically received DPA CRO funding and potentially along with other types of funds. Before we released that RFA, we made some program changes with the help of stakeholders. We had a lot of discussions, and then we got it approved by our Housing Stability Council. And some of those changes included increasing the first-time homebuyer limits up to $30,000 per eligible homebuyer. We also added a first-generation category. We'll talk about that definition later in this meeting. And first-generation homebuyers qualify for up to $60,000. And it's the cap or the lesser of the cap of their eligibility category or 20% of the purchase price. And due to technical restrictions with how the bill was worded with down payment assistance, CRO funding, that those funds could only be dispersed as grants. For all other funds, HOPE and CET, we've attempted to standardize what DPA looks like across the state. So any homebuyer going into a homeownership center or DPA provider organization has similar terms. So any amounts under $10,000 and under are provided as just down payment assistance grants. Amounts over $10,000 are provided as 5-year forgivable loans, and the partners can choose to either administer the loans in-house or have OHCS administer the loans on their behalf. So we've been administering loans for a number of our DPA providers. And then last, down payment assistance providers, organizations can combine any 2 sources of OHCS provided down payment assistance funds. Sorry if this is getting a little wonky and confusing. And then the term for that forgivable loan becomes 10 years, but you're able to combine funds and kind of maximize the funds that you have. So that's just kind of setting the basis of our DPA program. And I'll just, a reminder to those of you on the call that already have contracts with us, all funding sources, CRO, HOPE, and CET funds need to be dispersed into the transaction no later than the end of this month and closed by the end of June. So so your contracts are coming to an end, and it seems like everyone is on track to spending all these funds. We've extended a few agreements. So if we've extended your agreement already, that doesn't apply to you. If you do need an extension and haven't talked to us about that, please tell us immediately. And veterans funds have to be dispersed into the transaction by January 31st, 2026 and closed by March 1st, 2026. So you have a little bit more time. And then the final admin payment will be paid when the final summary report is submitted and all funds are expended or at program close. So just quick reminder for all of you who are currently managing OHCS DPA contracts. And we recently did a press release about this, but just wanted to share some of the amazing work done by you all related to specifically the down payment assistance CRO funds. Providers have dispersed almost 6.7 million to 209 home buyers. That's 209 households that are in their own home, which is amazing. An average of just over 32,000 per home buyer for homes that cost $335,000. 63% of these homebuyers identify as people of color and 73% as first-generation homebuyers. So really amazing work, and we're looking forward to reporting out on even more people impacted by this program at the end of this quarter. And then when it comes to future funding, what we're here to discuss. So just as I said before, HOPE funding is funded through document recording fees. So this revenue has slowed significantly over the past few years. And because we forward allocate funds based on projections of document recording fee receipt, we've seen that there's not enough HOPE funds to offer this coming biennium. And I think we've shared that before, so that might be news to some of you, but so a lot is hinging on how the legislative session goes. The governor's request budget included $30 million for CRRO down payment assistance, and just noting that the last biennial investment did not have that extra R. So only culturally responsive organizations qualified. This time we're adding a new R, and that's rural organizations. So culturally responsive and rural organizations will qualify for this investment. The session is still going. It won't end likely until the end of June. So we won't know for sure if we have this funding and what amount until the session is over likely. But we are convening this meeting because we really want to hit the ground running if we get that infusion of down payment assistance, and our goal is to maintain program continuity. So, we know that summer is the busiest home buyer season. We don't want people to be left in the lurch. We want to make sure that we have a plan for improving the program and also keeping your contracts going, and also bringing new partners into the fold. So trying to do all of the above. And then just to add a little bit more additional context before we get into our program changes and the meat of this program. And thanks for sharing out that dashboard, Heather. Heather put the link to our homeownership dashboard where you can see all sorts of outcomes for our programs, including down payment assistance. Actually, I'll pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions about future funding, the current program, before we go on to the next pieces? Feel free to raise your hand or unmute and ask. Okay, great. I'll keep going. Okay, so we did a quick scan of other programs, and Heather just put a really helpful link in the chat that has an updated list of the down payment assistance programs across the country. Every state has a housing finance agency that typically offers some type of DPA. And what we saw when we did this scan is that most state DPA programs, their down payment assistance is paired with their lending products. So OHCS has a type of down payment assistance that we pair with our flex lending program. And that's more similar to what other HFAs do. And so typically programs across the country cover 3 to 5% of the purchase price and are structured as a non-forgivable loan. And OHCS is different from other HFAs. We are governmental, most are quasi-governmental, most are very focused on lending, and we have a whole host of programs. So it makes sense that our program looks different. Often we look to California, Colorado, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and Washington as kind of our sister agencies that do things most similarly. So I just did a quick roundup of these, just 3 of those, and what they do when it comes to down payment assistance. And while we didn't look at every single HFA site, other than Colorado, we did not find a lot of HFAs that offer down payment assistance as grants, forgivable loans, and our DPA is consistently higher than per borrower than any other HFA. But Colorado grants up to 3% of the first mortgage, or loans up to 4%. Both are capped at $25,000. Minnesota offers a loan due at the end of the first mortgage term, and it's 0% interest, $14,000 and $18,000. And then Washington has 6 different types of down payment assistance programs, varying 3 to 5% of the first mortgage. And the caps are anywhere, most of them are between $10,000 and $15,000. And then they also have their $150,000 cap for the covenant homeownership loan. Most of these programs have a 0 to 4% interest rate and 30-year terms. So just to set the context of what other HFAs are doing, that doesn't mean that Oregon has to do everything like the other HFAs, but I think it's helpful to see other examples out there. And Shannon, I see your hand raised. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Talia. I just wanted to mention that this isn't self-funded state down payment assistance, but my understanding is that some other states, Iowa, I think is a great example, have been using their HUD home funding for down payment assistance, and they're not alone. And that has been in larger amounts than represented here, from what I understand. Also, some smaller, populous municipalities like Washington, D.C., at the city level is providing up to $100,000 per home buyer in down payment assistance. And I wanted to call out that Minnesota, for over 10 years now, has been providing 20-year mortgage capital at 2% interest to Habitat Minnesota that they can then relend at 3.5% interest to their home buyers. So while not technically down payment assistance is a considerable affordability investment. Thanks.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, and if others have other examples they want to share, feel free to put in the chat or unmute. I think it's really helpful to see how other programs are structured. Okay, great. So with that, I'm going to go into discussion. And the first thing that we wanted to start on as we're thinking about changes is we want to better understand what your priorities are when it comes to providing down payment assistance, whether you are a longtime down payment assistance provider, new this year, or contemplating providing down payment assistance to your community. We want to hear from you what you think is most important when it comes to down payment assistance, and really have that. We have our own opinions at OHCS, but we want to know what your perspective is. And I think that we can use that. I don't know if we'll get a full consensus about this today, but we want to use that to guide any program changes that we are going to make in the future. So I'm hoping that this works. I have a series of polls and I want to do the first one. And so we're going to ask you, what can you rank? There's a lot of different goals that we could achieve with down payment assistance. It could be serving the most Oregonians, and with that comes many different implications. You know, that might mean lowering our amounts per borrower, per home buyer, and just trying to serve as many people as possible. The goal could be serving those with the lowest incomes. So looking at people, the AMI, and trying to make sure we're targeting people with very low or low income. It could be eliminating racial disparities in homeownership, which is the goal of this CRO DPA program. And I think we would have to kind of unpack how we can hyper-focus DPA when it comes to that. Could be reducing the need for mortgage insurance for home buyers, so ensuring that everybody who qualifies is getting 20% down payment assistance, and then has lower mortgage payments long term. None of these are mutually exclusive, I'll say, but I think that thinking through, and then there's also a million other policy priorities that you might have in mind. So just thought we would start with these and have you rank these priorities, and then also please add any other priority that's top for you in the chat. So I'm going to launch this poll and give a second. Can everybody see the poll? Did that work?
Yes, it did.
Thank you. Okay, I'll give everyone 15 more seconds to fill out the poll. It looks like some of the top answers keep shifting depending on responses coming in. And I'm actually not, can folks see the results as people are filling it in, or can you only see your own? Okay. Not yet. Okay. Response details. Let's see if I can share.
I'm sorry, but my computer security won't let me do the poll. Is there a direct link by any chance?
I don't think there's a direct link because it's in Teams, but if you want to, shoot.
Can you
You
put your
can put
answer in the chat, and then we can record it and add it together at the end for the end result for ourselves, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that, Shannon.
And I'm not actually sure how to share this poll, but I'll share the answers out. And Heather, Kevin, feel free to, if you figure out how to share the poll, feel free to take over screen sharing. So the top ranked is serve those with the lowest incomes. Second, serve as many people as possible. Close third, eliminate racial disparities in homeownership. Fourth, reduce the need for mortgage insurance, and then other. And I think, and then I'm seeing some things coming through the chat. So does anybody want to go unmute and share a little bit more about what they're thinking?
Yeah, I can for just a second.
Great, go for it.
Yeah, my name's Thomas. I'm with CINA out in Ontario, Oregon. One thing I'd really like to emphasize about reducing the need for mortgage insurance, because that was actually my top priority, and I see that it's at the bottom. We've calculated it out with the home buyers that we've put through the program, which is about 35, and it's a ridiculous increase in the amount of money that the home buyers pay out over the course of the standard 30-year mortgages that we're helping them enter into. And so I just really like that to be at least talked about a little bit, because I think that by eliminating that, we eliminate a lot of the excess money that the borrowers have to pay out.
Thanks for sharing that, Thomas. And Erica, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I put a comment about this in the chat, but I'll talk about it a little bit also. I think when we have a relatively short timeline on our down payment assistance, even 2 years, that causes us to have to default to just serving people as fast as we can, and it makes it a lot more difficult to prioritize certain populations. So, and I'll also add that I think creating a statewide population prioritization might be slightly less helpful than having regional or organizational prioritizations for populations, because not every community looks the same. And there may be some unique challenges for certain communities that others just aren't even touched by. So I would first, I guess, advocate for more localized population prioritization. But I think the bigger point that I want to make is that, at least in my community, what we're finding is that we need a pretty long-term relationship with our customers. And it's getting harder and harder to bring customers in just for financial capabilities work. They want to have the promise that it will get them someplace meaningful. And if we don't have a very predictable program for down payment assistance where we can say, yes, work with us for a year or 2 years or 3 years or however long it's going to take you to get mortgage ready through our financial capabilities programming. If we can't say that down payment assistance will be available, then they don't have that carrot to go through that pretty challenging program. If we can say, I can guarantee you, or with pretty certain confidence, that this program will exist and it will look kind of this way, and you will have a shot at maybe this amount of money, if we can work through this program together, that creates a pretty strong incentive program where somebody is going to be a lot more willing to put in that time and disclose that information and build that relationship to not just get mortgage ready and move on to down payment assistance, but to be the kind of really stable, sustainable homeowner that we're looking to create with this program. So I guess the bottom line of what I'm trying to encourage is let's expand that timeline a little bit. Let's create a long runway so that we can have the most effective program possible for the really target populations that we're hoping to drill down in on.
Thanks for sharing that, Erica. Tess, I see your hand raised.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Tess Spelsey, and I work at Rooted Homes in Central Oregon. We're a community land trust here. And I had a hard time ranking these because I feel like the way the HOPE program and DPA was structured through the HOPE program, like, weaved a web of being able to serve all of these priorities. I guess not the most Oregonians, but like through the first generation money, we were able to see a huge spike in the diversity of people we were serving, and then also reducing the need for mortgage insurance and serving those with lower incomes, because when people have access to this down payment assistance, they don't need as high of a loan amount. And so then we're able to reach lower income households. What I'm seeing with the new flex lending program, as the way it's structured, is when people, because you have to choose between a lower interest rate and the down payment assistance, people have to split a pathway. Whereas like this is, the HOPE money was magic money that helped like accomplish these goals. The down payment assistance with the higher interest rate, at the end of the day, like people want the lower monthly payment. So they are going to have to choose between the two, whereas like with the HOPE money, they were able to get both. And that was really magical for like our under 80% home buyers.
Thanks, Tess. And Pooja, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you mind sharing your idea a bit more?
Sure. I was just, when Erica was talking, I was just thinking more localized. Like, for example, our organization, which we are a culturally specific organization doing a home ownership project. So having that resource, having a project-based down payment assistance program specific to these kind of projects would be really helpful for us to plan ahead and work with folks who would like be on our wait list 2, 3, 4 years in advance with that resource at the end of the tunnel, kind of. So it's not just randomly working, but like knowing that there is a house at the end, but which they would end up with. So I think, yeah, just making it more specific to projects.
Thanks, Pooja. And I think that's been a reason why we've extended some of the contracts this year, because we have partners that have specific timelines for their developments, and so the houses are coming online, and we've adjusted to make sure that the DPA can be used for that. Yeah, so thanks for sharing that idea. Scott.
Thanks, Talia. Scott Nordquist, Ben Redmond, Habitat for Humanity. First off, the HOPE DPA program has been super helpful. So I just want to give huge kudos to the state. It's been an awesome program to work with. I want to point out, so I put the avoiding PMI low on my ranking, and I think avoiding it is super important, as was mentioned earlier. With the habitat model, we typically use a silent second that functions as additional down payment assistance that avoids the need for DPA. So just adding to that perspective, it's not that it's not valuable, but we have a different mechanism to avoid PMI with ours. And then I also think I appreciate the flexibility with the awards, that we can max out the amount per buyer, or we can choose to spread it out further as an agency. And then one other thing that I just want to throw out as an idea that we've bounced around is the idea of like a tiered amount based on AMIs, so that you could have higher DPA amounts for lower AMIs, and then lower DPA amounts for the higher AMIs, and even going up into the 100, 120 range to pair with other programs. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. And you preempted an idea that we have coming forward. So great. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a slide or two. And let's go to Denise, and then we're going to move on unless anyone has something extremely pressing to share.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Denise with Access in Southern Oregon, and Scott just suggested something that we are already doing here in Access with this last funding cycle. And I just want to say we were able to accomplish the top 3 on the list that showed up in the poll, with lowest income serving most Oregonians and eliminating the racial disparities just by creating a tiered system. We learned very quickly after we were funded that the amounts, if people were to just get $60,000 or max out at 30 or 60, it would not go very far. So we implemented a tier system for exactly that reason, and it worked out really well. We were able to help a lot more households in our community. And so I just want to say that definitely worked. And so I really appreciate that idea. And I think it would be great if it was just set in place across the board from OHCS.
Thanks, Denise. And we might follow up with you for a little more details about how you tiered. Great. Okay, we're going to keep going, but thank you so much for that conversation. I think it's really helpful to be talking big picture about down payment assistance and why we're doing this. So before this meeting in the registration, and we've also heard from you all, or for some of you outside of the registration, just as we have conversations about down payment assistance, but in the meeting registration, we asked a specific question: are there any aspects of down payment assistance of the DPA program that need to be improved? And we got a number of answers, so thank you for filling out before as you registered, and they all fell into 3 categories: increase award amounts, increase income caps, and have accessibility improvements. And that's a pretty broad category and hits at some of what you were talking about, Erica, about the consistency in programming. So we're going to talk about the first 2 and some other technical changes that we are proposing for down payment assistance, and then we'll save the accessibility improvement conversation towards the end. And I'm hoping we have time for everything. So we'll share some of your suggestions and suggestions that we've had internally, and talk about the pros and cons. And again, I'll be putting up polls and may or may not be able to share the results, but we'll talk them through. Yeah, and I echo that, Denise, if you feel like sharing in the chat the tier system that you use, that might be helpful for everybody. And we're gonna talk about that in a second. So we'll talk first about changing award amounts. The first suggestion, or the first group of suggestions, was change award amounts. And we had these 3 different suggestions, again, not mutually exclusive, but increase the first time homebuyer cap to 40,000 and the first generation cap to 90,000. Remove the 20% of purchase price restriction, and tier award amounts based on homebuyer income. You know, as we think about the pros and cons, and I'm sure you all have other thoughts about this, you know, pros, the average cost of a home in Oregon is continually on the rise. It's about $500,000 right now. This cap increase would allow partners to provide down payment assistance that keeps pace with the rising home prices. Cons, a higher down payment amount means that there's less to spread around and less home buyers served, and potentially more gaps in availability of funds, and that might lead to that predicament of not being able to assure home buyers that if they put in the work that you'll have the DPA at the end. So many different implications to these 3 different options here. Again, there's a plethora of other options that could be proposed in terms of this. I'm going to keep going, but keep this in mind, and we'll pull you at the end, and have at the end of a couple slides, and then have a conversation about this a little bit more, and I can go back to this. So the second category of requests for changes was raise income caps. And there are a few suggestions to raise the income cap beyond 120% AMI, but OHCS is statutorily bound to serving 120% AMI and lower. So if you don't see a response here, it's because we just can't do that. So most of the responses were raise income cap to 120% of area median income. And again, you know, pros of this: owning a home is unaffordable for many people, not just 100% and lower, which is our current program guideline. Cons, you know, by statute, HOPE funds can only serve home buyers that serve up to 100% of AMI. So we've heard from partners, and this goes back to that accessibility issue, that the DPA program can be complicated to administer, confusing. This would cause administrative burden. You would be, different borrowers or home buyers would qualify for different sources of funds, depending on what funds you're handling at the moment. And I guess in this coming biennium, it will only be CRRO DPA funds, so not as much of an administrative burden right off, but partners would have to manage different income limits for different DPA funds. It would make it harder to combine funds. I guess I'll say there will also be construction excise tax funds available. Those have continued to accrue, likely out in the RFA. Fewer funds, if we increase the AMI limits, that means fewer funds to those with the greatest need. And, you know, going back to that initial poll, it seems like people are, sorry, I'm looking at Shannon's. Yes, we can adjust through legislative process in future biennium, just not for this coming biennium. And future fund, this could also lead to, again, that issue of, you know, people with higher incomes are going to be mortgage ready sooner than potentially those with lower incomes. So the DPA might get eaten up by people with higher incomes, and then we're not serving those with lower incomes as much. And this is all, it's not untenable. This is all stuff that you have a large degree of agency in how to manage your program once you get the funds. But just trying to point out some of the pros and cons here. So with that, I will launch another poll, and then we can have some discussion about the results and any thoughts on these suggestions. So let me get that up. And this is a 3-question poll, so make sure you keep scanning across. And nothing is set in stone based on these polls after today. This is our initial gauging of everybody's thoughts. Yeah, thank you, Laura. Feel free to add other thoughts in the chat. Give everybody another couple seconds to answer. Okay, I am going to share the results since I can't share them on my screen. So given your DPA priorities, are you interested in seeing an increase in the caps for first-time and first-generation homebuyers? 53% of you, the number just changed, said yes, 19% said no, and 28% said maybe. You can keep filling in the poll if you haven't yet. Given your down payment assistance priorities, what do you think about a tiered cap based on income? That was a 4 stars, a rating of a 3.9. So 31% gave that a 4 stars, 15% 3 stars, 3% 2 stars, 9% 1 star. I think. Oh, and 40% 5 stars. Given your DPA priorities, should OHCS raise the income cap to 120% AMI? 47% of you said yes, 25% of you said no, 28% said maybe. So thanks for filling this out. If you weren't able to do that, feel free to enter it in the chat or follow up with us and email. Sorry, this doesn't work for everybody. We'll come up with a different way of doing this next time. And yeah, let's open it up to conversation. I see Michelle has her hand raised.
Hi, everyone. This is Michelle with African American Alliance for Homeownership in Portland. As I'm thinking about this, I'm glad, thank you for having this meeting and asking these questions and trying to get feedback on what works for us folks on the ground, getting this money out. I think for me, and for what we've seen is that we get down payment assistance from City of Portland, and then OHCS. And comparing the two, one thing that I love about OHCS is that I think you guys have done a really good job trying to reduce like that administrative burden and the complexity, and really given us as an organization a lot of freedom to decide, like, you know, there are caps and the income limits, but we don't have to give, you know, somebody the full amount if we're seeing that that's not really, like, they don't need that full amount. They need just like this little bit to get them across the finish line, or somebody else who really does need that full amount, then we can make sure that we've got those resources for them. And we have that autonomy to make those decisions and look at our clientele and say, who are those folks that, you know, are super low income that have been working with us for 3 years and now they're ready, and like, can we make them a priority over somebody who joined our program last month and is a higher AMI? So I just really appreciate that OHCS has given us the flexibility to set our parameters. And as long as they're within kind of those bigger parameters that OHCS sets, then we're good to go. And so I love the idea of increasing caps and increasing income restrictions. I don't like the idea of setting tiers and setting more requirements. I would like each organization to be able to set that for themselves and figure out systems that work for their population.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else want to chime in? Go for it, Shannon.
Thank you. I attempted to put this in the chat, and I feel like I'm not the expert on my team around this, so maybe some follow-up would be helpful. But I think in our experience, when we're pairing down payment assistance with LIFT-funded homes, for example, that are permanently affordable, that the 20% purchase price restriction kind of artificially made it impossible for us to more deeply support lower AMI CLT homebuyers, so that higher AMI CLT homebuyers accidentally got a better deal at the end of the day. And it really wasn't our intention, and I don't think it was an intentionality in the program design. I just think it was an unfortunate implication that could be addressed. Thanks.
Louise, can you share a little bit more about your experience with that?
Yeah, I was nodding my head as Michelle was talking. We try to provide as much help with our families, right? That not everyone gets the maximum amount. We always know families are approaching each program wanting the max, but then with a conversation between them, the lender, we try to determine where the need is truly at to be able to help them, whether it's enough to be able to avoid mortgage insurance, whether it's enough to just cover closing costs, down payment, you know, whatever that is. It doesn't always amount to that full 30,000 or 60,000. And so it's a little bit of that equitable approach of like trying to meet each family where there is their need, and then trying to stretch as much of that dollar as possible. So, so for me, adding those caps would kind of change a little bit of how we run our program with the flexibility that we have. But I agree with what Michelle was saying. We run ours very similar.
Talia, can I just speak real quick? This is Alicia. I just wanted to share if you guys could send us a sample of how that works so we can take a look at it. One of the things at Housing Stability Council was specifically to keep the cap at 20% of the purchase price. And that was a decision by our council. So if you could share with us what that looks like in a CLT model, that would be really helpful so that we can explain why it doesn't work to have that 20% cap. If any of you, Shannon, I know you said that your staff has more experience in that rather than yourself, but if you could ask someone to share that with me, that would be really helpful for us to take a look at the redesign potential. Thank you.
Great. Thank you everyone for chiming in here. I'm going to keep going. Again, feel free to add to the chat, come back to this. And yeah, thanks Shannon in advance for following up. Okay, so this is a lot of text on the slide. And this is, again, more of a technical question. And we can follow up with you later with this language, but our current definition of first generation homebuyer, we use language from the Build Back Better Act, which we just wanted to make sure it aligned with any future investments coming from the federal government. Obviously, that definition is not at play now, and we're seeking to simplify the definition a bit. And so we've provided 2 potential other definitions on the right-hand side of the screen, borrowed from other HFAs. And so just would like your feedback. We don't have to just use their definitions verbatim. And so feel free to suggest a tweak to any of the definitions, or again, think about it more. But the Virginia definition is an individual qualifies as a first generation homebuyer if they have parents or legal guardians who have never owned a home in any state or country, or have parents or legal guardians who lost ownership due to a foreclosure, short sale, or deed in lieu and have not owned again, or are an individual who has at any time been placed in foster care. The California one, and I'm going to launch the poll as I read it because the language is pasted into the polls as well. So 1 second. So the California one is a home buyer who has not been on title, held an ownership interest, or have been named on a mortgage to a home on a permanent foundation and owned land in the US in the last 7 years. And to the best of the home buyer's knowledge, whose parents, biological or adoptive, do not have any present ownership interest in a home in the US, or if deceased, whose parents did not have any ownership interest at the time of death in a home in the US, or an individual who has at any time been placed in foster care or institutional care, and they define what that is. So again, these are also very wordy definitions, but we're interested in your opinions about updating our definition. And feel free to keep filling out the poll, but I'll also, I see in the chat, and Quillen, do you want to speak up here?
Yeah, I'm really curious. I hope that we get some dialogue. We're approaching launching our Legacy Builder program, and this first generation question provision. It's I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I'm really curious about the feedback, because what I see happening, kind of like the conversation around the income limits, it starts to kind of curate takes us away from the objective. If we're not careful. Like, one example is the never ever owning a home, even in another country. There's a part of this also too that's in some of the conversations I've had seem to steer towards that it would, be most helpful to those who are immigrants, and not necessarily, indigenous, folks, or African American, or folks that have, been here even longer. And so I'm just really curious about this conversation, because there's also, one example is I use myself. My dad, the only reason why I grew up in a home was because my father was in the military. And so, but none of my brothers have money for down payment, because they're still living in the home. And so there's all kind of different variables. So I'm just curious about this conversation so that we can, try to go in the right direction as you are.
Thanks, Quaylen. And yeah, good to know that this influences other conversations being had elsewhere. So yeah, keep us posted on whether it makes sense to have more conversations about this. It looks like, I think I see a chat that says that you all can see the results. So that's great, but I will share them just in case you can't. So sounds like 41% of you want to keep the one that OHCS is already using. And 27%, oh, it's tied between California and Virginia. What a twist. And then 5% selected other. So we will keep that in mind. It looks like maybe folks are more interested in just keeping with what we have. So feel free to send us other thoughts on this. Anybody else have thoughts that they want to share verbally before we move on? Yeah, I hear ya, Sarah. She says, I don't think owning a home in another country should disqualify the borrower. Dylan says, what about deceased parents? The California definition has something about that, but I don't think the Virginia definition addresses that. And our current definition addresses that. So, okay, thank you, everyone. We're gonna keep going. Again, feel free to let us know if you have other thoughts. And here's just some other things that we're thinking about. And again, I'll pull you after discussing this. One question in our mind has been, so, you know, the program is open to anybody that is buying a home in Oregon right now who is or will be an Oregon resident. And the question is, do we restrict the program to current residents or keep it open to anyone buying a home in Oregon? We've heard some feedback about that, so wanted to get your thoughts on this. So for example, if someone is moving from New York, are they eligible for DPA assistance as long as they're buying a home in Oregon? Currently, just moving on to the next one, currently DPA can be used to fund purchase of manufactured homes on fee simple land, so, and privately owned land, but it cannot be used for a manufactured home purchase that's going to be placed in a park. So is there interest in updating this? It would include a new process because it's not a deed of trust for a manufactured home. We would have to look through the UCC filing, and I don't know enough about this to talk about it intelligently. So I think we'd have to do a lot more research to give guidance and consult with our manufactured housing team. And then I think there would also be some updates to ensure that the purchase is for a quality, habitable manufactured home. Is there interest in expanding eligibility for manufactured homes, not just those on private land? And then is there interest in changing forgiveness periods? Right now it's 5 years. It's forgiven in one chunk at the very end. We know that Portland does this differently. It's a 30-year, but it's forgiven at half at 15 years and then 3% every year after. That's probably a little too complicated for us to administer on our end, but is there interest in making a longer forgiveness period and just somewhat different terms? And that could be based on the amount, based on area median income. Again, you can say, we want, if you administer the loans, you want to do it on your own terms. So I am going to open up the poll, and also feel free to chime in if you have questions about any of these. 1 second. We're getting close to the last poll. I think we have one more after this. So again, this is a multi-question poll. So make sure you scroll through to each of the 4 questions. So the first question, for those that can't see the poll, should we restrict residents to current Oregon residents or allow anyone buying a home in Oregon? Would your agency be interested in offering down payment assistance for manufactured home buyers, any manufactured, whether they're in a park or on private land? And the answers are yes, no, or maybe. And then what do you think about extending the loan forgiveness period beyond 5 years based on area median income? What do you think about extending the loan term based on the amount of the loan? Just kind of that tiered approach. Okay, I'm going to start sharing out results just to keep moving, but feel free to keep entering in the poll or in the chat. So Oregon resident restriction, it looks like 56% are interested in restricting to current residents. Would your agency be interested in offering down payment assistance for manufactured home buyers? 56% are, 16% are not, 28% are maybe. What do you think about extending the loan forgiveness period beyond 5 years based on AMI? Looks like people are lukewarm on this suggestion. 2.5 stars is the average. And then what do you think about extending the loan term based on the amount of the loan? And 2.7 is the average on, again, kind of lukewarm on that idea. So thank you for filling out that poll. I'll pause, and then we just have a couple more slides after this, and we can just have more general conversation. So Michelle, go for it.
Yeah, I might be missing something, but I don't see how extending the loan forgiveness term in any way would ever benefit our clients. Like, our clients are folks in need, and it would just be adding more barriers. And especially if we did it based on like loan amount, I think you're going to see that you're going to punish lower AMI families because they're going to need more assistance, and then they're going to have this longer forgiveness term, and we're just putting up a barrier that sucks. We shouldn't do that.
Thanks. Thomas.
Yeah, thanks. So with us being out in Ontario, Oregon, we're literally on the border of Idaho. So we actually have a lot of interest in participating in our DPA program out here that we go through with you guys at OHCS. And one thing that I can say is that if we eliminate the ability for people from out of state to move into Oregon, a lot of them are still going to move into Oregon. And if they do that without DPA funds, it's going to increase their chances of being an unstable homeowner in the future. Because even though they're moving from out of state, they're going to become an Oregonian, and they're going to qualify for all of the other services that the nonprofits are offering. And it's just going to put stress in that area. And we're a really small rural service area. And so increasing that area, increasing foreclosures, our foreclosures are already going up. it's going to put a lot of stress on us, a lot of stress on our community, and there's already a lot of stress anyway.
Thanks for sharing that. Shannon.
Thanks. I'm just a little concerned about adding in down payment assistance for manufactured homes and park when essentially, even if we're, and I'd love to be wrong, wildly successful this legislative session, we're looking at flat funding in the next biennia. And it seems like we're all talking about the importance of having stable, predictable funding through the years. So it seems, I don't mean to be ungenerous in this statement. I just think if that's one of our goals, then I'm struggling with the rationale for adding a new down payment assistance program when there aren't more resources. Thanks.
Thanks, Shannon. And the idea would be that it's not a new program, it's part of the program, just expanding eligibility. Just there would be certain administrative functions that would need to operate differently for that.
Well, it would be expanding the pool of eligible recipients without expanding the pool of resources, I think, though.
Yeah. Salvador?
Hello, everybody. We service 5 counties. So since we're literally right on the Columbia River Gorge, we service 2 counties in Washington and 3 in Oregon. And if we were to limit, like he was mentioning, just to Oregonians, like we're literally right on the border. Like people from Washington come and work here. I was like, they're just looking for that one opportunity to be able to purchase in Oregon, or vice versa. People that are living in Oregon wanting to purchase in Washington, we are actually coming up with that same problem for Washington down payment because they just want Washingtonians. And due to where the jobs are at, sometimes it's just not possible because one, they don't have enough income and stuff like that. So especially in this area, especially in Skamania and Clickett counties, there's so one of those 2 counties that goes based off of the Portland metro area. So that means that the homes are being sold for that kind of amount, which then will limit those areas and only hurts them as well as us to be able to provide down payment assistance. But yeah, it's just maybe what we could do is base it off of where the agencies are at and at their discretion if they want to do that. It's just to resolve that issue.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It sounds like that last suggestion would be the best approach, to have it agency by agency. Laura?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation about the manufactured home parks. We'd be really hesitant to extend DPA to folks that'll be purchasing a home that is essentially paying rent for space in a park. And I believe that's what we're talking about as far as this expansion. And I know there's legislation in Salem right now addressing this, but there's a lot of abuse that takes place in those parks. There's lots of large national companies that are investing in these parks in order to squeeze every last dollar out of the residents there and then sell them and kick them out. So our goal here is long-term sustainable homeownership, and at the way things are currently, I don't see manufactured home parks as long-term stable homeownership. So we would want the buyer to have to own the land, or it be part of a land trust or something like that to mitigate that risk, because we wouldn't want to put like Shannon mentioned, like really limited resources that we have, just to have it be kind of siphoned away into to other places and not go to the longevity of financial stability for the homeowner.
Thanks for sharing, Laura. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so we're gonna keep going. That was really helpful feedback. Thank you, everyone. Another proposal that we have, I don't think this will be controversial, but just putting it forth and sharing in case there are unintended consequences. For our thought was to increase the cap for grants and loans. So currently, any amount of DPA up to $10,000 must be provided as a grant. We're proposing to increase that to $15,000. Any amount over $15,000 must be administered as a loan. The agency can do the loan administration or have OHCS provide that loan administration on their behalf. So that's the first proposal here. Moving forward, this is the second piece. Moving forward, OHCS will be charging a loan administration fee of $750 per loan to cover our costs. There's just a lot of hours put in within our agency for each loan. And so this is the amount when we did all the calculations that will allow us to cover some of the costs. So just pausing here for any reflections. Okay. So we will have that conversation about access, but I just want to make sure that we tell you what we're thinking in case people have to take off early. So we've thrown a lot at you today. These are a lot of potential changes, and nothing, again, is solidified right now. I think we've gotten a lot of really valuable insight from you all. We may convene another stakeholder meeting, and I'd be interested in hearing if folks want to come together again and talk about any other specific issues. We will let you know, even if we don't convene another meeting, we will definitely communicate with this group about what we're thinking in terms of program changes and maybe seeking feedback from smaller groups or individually. So there will be some more communication is basically what I'm saying. Any program changes that we make need to be approved by our Housing Stability Council before we can implement them, so that they would need to be approved by July and August if we're on this timeline that we're thinking about that I'll talk about next. So if, again, this funding is still up in the air, there's a lot of legislative session left to go. So if the funds are approved, we will seek to have an interim solution to make sure that grants can continue, and then a longer term solution for implementing these program changes and bringing new partners into the fold. So we'll, with current DPA providers, we will, as quickly as possible, try to enter 6 to 9 month agreement with you so that you can continue your programs. And I'll put up this poll in a second. We have some questions for you about how to kind of disperse or allocate those funds. So we would take a portion of whatever we receive from the legislature, a smaller portion, put it aside for continuity of service, and we would have to start new contracts. We can't just extend your contracts, but we'd start new contracts with everybody who is currently a DPA, a CRO DPA provider. And then the second step would be that during that time, we would work on developing a new request for applications so that we can award the bulk of the remaining funds competitively. And that's the piece where we can then bring in new organizations that are interested in providing down payment assistance and also award the funds to existing organizations. So it'd be a competitive process. I see a question here. Oh, and Alicia answered. Okay. I will start a poll, and this is more for the existing grantees. How should we allocate the funds? Should it be equally, say we get 30 million? I am just spitballing numbers here. This is, please get this word, but say we get 30 million in down payment assistance funds. We set aside 5 million to keep programs going. How should we allocate the funds? Equally among all previous grantees, or should we do a percentage of the previous award? Should we do it based on an estimation on how much each grantee expects they could use over the grant period? Something else entirely. So this is just, we're getting our toes slightly wet in thinking about this, but there hasn't been a ton of planning yet for this kind of interim contract and then longer term contract, but just wanted to get your initial intuition on how that might be done. Okay, great, thank you. Feel free to keep adding, but it looks like people are interested in allocation based on an estimation of how much each grantee can use over the grant period. Second up is a percentage of each previous award, and third, equally among all previous grantees. And we'll look at your responses in the chat. Okay, thank you. And then last, we wanted to talk about program accessibility, and that we might have to have a part 2 of this conversation. But as we mentioned, the responses in the registration, we grouped into 3 categories. Here are the responses that we saw. We removed duplicates, but related to program accessibility. So one was, there's always room for improvement, working with partners on the reporting and making it easier. So reporting is a trend among these responses. Communication that reaches the community, outreach to BIPOC communities. Be interested to hear whoever put that, how they relate that back to how OHCS can support with that. And we need a long lead time to move participants along the pathway to being able to use DPA, this predictability, consistency piece. Again, let's continue having this conversation about, we deal with funding uncertainty just as much as you do, but how can we potentially find ways to make it feel more sustainable and consistent? And then clarity around funding limits and layering resources was a bit confusing at the start of the program. We were able to work through questions, but so how can OHCS be clearer on how the program works and the funding limits and all the different technical aspects of the program? So feel free to add in other thoughts around program accessibility, but we also have a few questions for you, especially considering that we have new partners on the line that are interested in offering DPA. I know not everybody went through the application process, but most of you have likely seen what a OHCS application and request for application process looks like. So how can we make this process more accessible for organizations that would be new to DPA provision? You know, one thing we look at is your history or track record of providing this service. So what other types of comparable programs or capacity skills and ability to attract qualified home buyers should we use to kind of evaluate your capacity to run the DPA program? And then what can we do to make program requirements clear, more streamlined, less time intensive? So these are pretty loaded, meaty questions, but wanted to open it up for conversation in the last 10 minutes about this. And as we're working on that, once we know we have the funding and we're working on the request for applications, we can do some more conversation about this and maybe add some more tangible questions because these are pretty broad. And also work with you when the awards are posted and we're onboarding new folks. We can be collecting more information about how to improve this as well. But any initial thoughts? Okay, any questions for us on anything we've presented today or anything about the DPA program?
Yeah, we have 2 questions in the chat. I think Alicia might be working on answering. But as far as I know, I don't think we have a list yet. But maybe they can email us if they're wanting to know if their organization would qualify, or is there a better way to discuss that?
So how do you apply to become a CRRO organization? There's not an application process. Heather, maybe you could post the definition of culturally responsive organization in the chat.
There is an application process.
Oh,
There is
I'm
an
sorry.
application. There
Okay,
is.
go for
And
it,
I was just
Alicia.
getting ready to post it into our chat. So as long as I'm on mic, we have not determined yet for the rural piece. So there would be 2 components that we would have to take a look at, but we haven't gotten there yet because we still in the initial phases since we don't know for sure about the money. But we do have an application that was used in the previous for culturally responsive organizations. So I would think we would still use the same one, but I can share it so that people can see what the eligibility requirements are. I'll get that to you right away.
Thank you, Alicia. Juan asks, is there an opportunity for a networking group to share best practices? Definitely, we are actually working with Housing Oregon right now to do a needs assessment among organizations that provide homeownership services and understand your needs a little better, and whether and how we can support that, or Housing Oregon can support that, and have been asking if a peer group might be helpful. So I think that's an outlet for helping us understand your needs so that we can create a space where there can be more networking and shared best practices. Outside of that, we can also, if there's interest, we could convene that sooner rather than later. We have some cases where homebuyer education was completed by an agency that is not on the OHCS provider list, but are HUD certified. Can we suggest adding new providers to the approval list? Alicia, do you want to comment on that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You can look at Sarah's question. We have cases where the home education was completed by an agency that's not on the OHCS provider list, but they're HUD certified. Can they suggest adding new providers to the approved list?
So we try to standardize so that home buyers were receiving similar type of education from all of our homeownership centers. But we also did in the current program, if you wanted to apply to be an approved education provider, we did offer that in the current program, and that could be something that we could offer again for this new program, is allowing organizations to submit their documentation to show that they are they want to be an approved provider so that they can provide education for their home buyers. So we do have additional education providers in the current program. It just depends on who applied at the time of the application. Sorry, I was struggling with getting our form uploaded.
Okay, and I think that if they're a HUD certified provider, you can send us their name and we can add it to the approved provider list.
For the new program, but not the current one.
What if an agency met the eligibility requirements for CRO and rural, then you would qualify for funding. Is there more to that question, Thomas?
Yeah, sorry, I guess I didn't phrase that very well. So in the previous program that we're going through, there was multiple avenues that you could qualify for, and you could apply to participate in. And so I was curious, is this going to be a CRO section and a rural section? Is this going to be a combined section? Is there going to be like some kind of reward points basis if an agency meets both requirements, therefore they're able to serve both demographics? That's kind of what I meant.
Yeah, those are great questions. I think we don't have that quite figured out yet. Our goal is to make the application easy and streamlined, and definitely, yeah, if you're culturally responsive and or rural, you will qualify. But yeah, too early to say exactly how the evaluation will work. And then Melissa, sorry we missed your first question. There's not a list of organizations up on our website about who's considered a CRRO. We do have, we can share who qualified for the CRO funds last biennium. We can follow up with you. Laura.
Yeah, I have a question kind of backing up to when we were talking about changes to the grant and loan administration section. You said that grants would be up to $15,000 and loans for amounts over 15. Would that be two separate like categories? Like if someone needed $20,000, it would all be a loan, or would 15 of it be a grant and 5 a loan? Like how would that be like administered, I guess?
The full 20 would be the loan.
So if they need more than 15, so there's no like layering, it would have to be one or the other.
Correct, yeah. Any amount over 15, the total amount would be the loan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we just have 3 minutes left. We won't hold you unnecessarily, but I want to pose one more question. Again, we threw a lot at you today. How are folks feeling, and are people interested in coming back together to continue the conversation? And if that's a yes, are there specific things that you want to dig into a little bit more?
I'll just say real briefly. So for me, that's a yes, primarily because you've given us a tremendous amount of potential changes that could come for the program. So just if there is going to be some big changes like the ones that were presented, just trying to get an idea ahead of time before we see the application to be able to submit and request funds, right? So that way we're a little bit prepared, and we have a good idea as to how those decisions came to be, because it's going to impact all of us. And I think the only other piece is I think a lot of us are just kind of also waiting on what funding is going to look like and whether we're going to be able to run a program in the next couple of months or not. So, but we appreciate all the work.
Thanks. Okay, great. We will plan on setting a date once we know more about, probably before the legislative session is over, so that we can get stuff moving. But we are very anxious to see how things will play out. Yeah, and if anybody has additional thoughts, feel free to email anyone on this team, me, Alicia, Heather, Kevin. We will share them with each other as we're mulling over some of this feedback. And yes, definitely keep you posted as we make decisions or come back to you with more questions. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today, and hope you have a good rest of your day. And we'll stick around for a second. Denise, I see you have your hand raised. All right. Thank you, everyone.